At 6 a.m., the wooden floorboards vibrated beneath my feet. A heavy, furious thud echoed down the hallway, followed by a violent crunch of splintering wood. I stood in the dim light of my living room, my pulse steady, holding a lukewarm cup of black coffee. It was the sound of my own son trying to destroy my front door. But to understand how a sledgehammer became the only way David could communicate with me, you have to look back 3 months. That was when I made the mistake of opening the door for him and his wife, Sarah. They stood on my porch in the pouring rain, dragging 3 oversized suitcases. Their apartment lease had ended, and the new place wouldn't be ready for just a few weeks. David looked exhausted. Sarah looked annoyed, scrolling through her phone without even offering a greeting. I am Lisa Barrett. I've lived in this house for 30 years. I know every creak of the stairs and every draft in the windows. I raised David here after his father passed away. I didn't hesitate to let them in, assuming it was just a brief stumble in their lives. The first shift happened on day 3. I walked into my kitchen to make my morning coffee, only to find my vintage espresso machine shoved into a dark pantry corner. In its place sat a shiny, oversized smart blender. Sarah leaned against the counter, sipping a green smoothie. Your setup was totally inefficient, Lisa. I organized it so the things we actually use are up front. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or give her a lecture on respect. I simply walked over to the pantry, picked up her heavy blender, and set it on the floor. Then I carried my espresso machine back to its rightful spot, plugged it in, and turned it on. Sarah's jaw tightened. I was just trying to help. I didn't ask for help, I replied, pulling my favorite mug from the cabinet. She stormed off. I sipped my coffee, knowing this was only the beginning. By the end of the second week, the few weeks narrative had quietly vanished. There was no talk of apartment hunting. Instead, David and Sarah were settling in like permanent residents who had just inherited a fully staffed bed and breakfast. The real test of boundaries started in the hallway. I found a massive wicker basket overflowing with their dirty clothes planted right outside the laundry room door. On top of it was a sticky note in Sarah's looping handwriting, whites on warm darks on cold. Please use the organic detergent. I stared at the note. I hadn't done David's laundry since he was 17, and I certainly wasn't going to start washing his wife's yoga pants. I didn't get angry. Anger is a waste of energy. I picked up the heavy basket, walked it straight up the stairs, and dumped the entire contents directly onto the center of their mattress. I left the sticky note stuck to David's favorite jacket. That evening, heavy footsteps pounded down the stairs. David appeared in the kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck, looking uncomfortable. Mom, Sarah, is really upset. She said you threw our laundry on the bed. We're both working long hours. We just thought you wouldn't mind throwing a load in since you're home. I chopped a carrot, the knife hitting the cutting board, with a sharp, rhythmic thack. I answered, not looking up. It's just a load of clothes, he muttered, reverting to the whining tone he used as a teenager. I put the knife down and finally looked at him. You have 2 hands, David. The washing machine has 3 buttons. Figure it out or take it to a laundromat. This is a house, not a hotel. He opened his mouth to argue, saw the look in my eyes, and closed it. He retreated upstairs. But the next morning, I noticed something else. The spare keys I kept hanging by the back door were gone. They were getting too comfortable. Things escalated quietly. When someone wants to take over your space, they don't usually declare war. They just start erasing you 1 inch at a time. I came home from the gardening center on a Tuesday afternoon to find the hallway completely bare. The antique oak console table, the one my late husband refurbished with his own hands, was gone. The framed family photos that had sat on it were stacked carelessly on a kitchen chair. Sarah was on the couch, typing away on her laptop. Where is the table? I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. She didn't even look up. Oh, I put it out by the curb. The bulky wood was ruining the feng shui of the entryway. I ordered a sleek metal one on Amazon. It fits our vibe much better. My chest tightened, but I refused to let her see me lose my composure. I didn't scream. I didn't cry about my late husband's memory. I simply walked out the front door. The table was sitting on the grass. I dragged it back up the steps, pushed it through the front door, and shoved it right back into its original spot. Sarah finally looked up, eyes wide. "What are you doing? The trash truck is coming in an hour. Do not ever touch my furniture again." I stated my voice, dead calm. "We live here too," she snapped, snapping her laptop shut. "We should have a say in how the house looks." "Our guests," I corrected her. I gathered my photos and took them to my master bedroom. That afternoon, I drove to the hardware store. I didn't buy a flimsy interior lock. I bought a heavy-duty deadbolt. By dinner time, I had installed it on my bedroom door. When I went to bed that night, I turned the thick metal lock with a satisfying click. If they were going to treat my home like a playground, I was going to turn my room into a fortress. The financial presumptions began shortly after the furniture incident. The mail arrived on a Friday, and I opened my monthly internet and cable bill. The total had skyrocketed. Someone had upgraded the account to the absolute highest tier, added premium sports packages, and purchased 3 pay-per-view movies. I walked into the living room. David was sprawled on the couch playing a video game online. "David," I held up the bill. "Care to explain why my internet bill tripled?" He didn't pause his game. "Oh yeah. The Wi-Fi was too slow for Sarah's remote work meetings, and I needed better ping for gaming. I just called the company and upgraded it. It's way faster now, right? You authorized changes on an account in my name. Mom, chill out. We need it." It's not a big deal. I didn't waste breath arguing. I walked straight to my office, picked up the phone, and called the provider. I didn't ask them to downgrade the package. I canceled the entire service effective immediately. 10 minutes later, the video game on the television froze. David groaned aggressively, pressing buttons on his controller. Sarah stomped out of the kitchen holding her phone in the air. "Did the router die?" she demanded. "I'm on a deadline." I walked out of my office, pulling my reading glasses down. "The router is fine. The service is canceled." David dropped his controller. "What? Why would you do that?" "Because I don't pay for things I didn't authorize," I replied smoothly. "If you want premium internet, you can call the company, open an account under your own name, and pay for it with your own credit card." Sarah's face turned bright red. "You're being completely unreasonable. How are we supposed to live without Wi-Fi? You have data on your phones?" I offered a small, polite smile on my face. "Or there's a coffee shop 3 blocks down." I turned around, walked into my bedroom, and locked the deadbolt. Let them burn their own cellular data. The lack of internet didn't push them out. It only made them resentful. The house settled into a cold war. They stopped talking to me, treating me like an annoying roommate they were forced to endure. One warm evening, I was sitting on my darkened porch, enjoying the cool breeze. The kitchen window was open behind me. I heard the clinking of wine glasses, followed by the low, hushed voices of David and Sarah. I stayed perfectly still in my wicker chair. "I can't do this much longer," Sarah hissed. "She is impossible. She treats us like children." "Just hold on," David muttered. "We're saving so much money by not paying rent. We need to think long-term." Sarah pressed her voice sharp and calculating. "Look at her. She's getting forgetful. She locks herself in her room like a paranoid hermit. If we document this behavior, we can easily get a doctor to sign off that she needs supervised care." My blood ran cold, but my breathing stayed slow. An assisted living facility, David asked, hesitating. A nice one, Sarah urged. She'd have friends, and we'd have the house. We could finally renovate that outdated kitchen and make this place ours. It's going to be yours eventually anyway. Why wait 10 years when we need it now? Silence stretched in the kitchen. I waited for my son to defend me. I waited for him to tell his wife she was out of her mind. Instead, David sighed. We'd need to get my name on the deed first. Or get power of attorney. If I tell her it's for tax purposes, she might sign it. I didn't cry. I didn't barge in and scream at them. Panic and rage are for people who don't have a plan. I stood up, silently walked down the porch steps, and went around the back of the house to enter through my bedroom slider. They wanted my house. They thought I was a fragile old woman they could push aside. They were about to find out exactly who they were dealing with. The next morning, I made a phone call. I didn't call an attorney. Legal battles take months and drain your bank account. I needed immediate practical reality. I called Arthur. Arthur was a retired general contractor. He was built like a brick wall, had a voice like gravel, and had been my late husband's best friend. He knew this house inside and out because he helped build the extension 20 years ago. He came over while David and Sarah were out at work. We sat at the kitchen table and I told him exactly what I had overheard. Arthur's jaw tightened. He placed his massive, calloused hands on his coffee mug. You want me to throw them out by the collars, Lisa? Just give the word. No, I said, shaking my head. No drama, no physical fights. I just want them gone and I want it done so cleanly they can't even blink. What's the timeline, he asked. They mentioned a couple's getaway this weekend to celebrate Sarah's birthday. They leave Friday afternoon and come back Sunday morning. A slow, grim smile spread across Arthur's face. 48 hours. More than enough time. I'll bring my boys. We'll need boxes, heavy-duty tape, and 3 new deadbolts. You want to upgrade the window latches while we're at it? Do it. I nodded. I spent the next 3 days observing David and Sarah. They were overly sweet to me. David offered to mow the lawn. Sarah bought me a box of expensive tea. It was a calculated performance laying the groundwork for the tax-purpose paperwork they planned to shove in front of me soon. I accepted the tea, thanked David for the lawn, and kept my face a blank, pleasant mask. When Friday afternoon finally arrived, they packed their bags into David's car. Have a nice weekend, Mom, David waved. Take care, I replied. The second their car turned the corner, Arthur's heavy-duty truck pulled into my driveway. Arthur didn't come alone. He brought his 2 grown sons, both built just like him. They walked through the front door carrying stacks of flattened cardboard boxes and rolls of industrial packing tape. All right, Lisa, Arthur said, rolling up his flannel sleeves. Show us what goes. I pointed upstairs. Everything in the guest room, every toothbrush in the bathroom, every organic smoothie powder in the pantry. We worked with mechanical efficiency. I didn't throw anything away that gives people a reason to claim damages. I just packed it. We folded Sarah's expensive clothes, boxed up David's gaming console, and wrapped their shoes. Every single trace of them was placed into heavy cardboard boxes and taped shut. By Saturday evening, Arthur's truck was loaded to the brim. He drove it to a 24-hour self-storage facility 3 miles down the road, rented a unit in my name, and stacked their entire lives inside it. Meanwhile, Arthur's sons were at my front and back doors. The old brass locks came out. Solid steel, heavy-duty deadbolts went in. They changed the garage code. They installed a reinforced strike plate on the front door frame. When Sunday morning dawned, the house was immaculate. The vintage console table was polished. My espresso machine hummed quietly in the kitchen. The guest room was completely empty, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. I sat at the kitchen island drinking my coffee, watching the clock tick towards 6 a.m. I knew they were planning an early return to beat the Sunday traffic. Arthur sat across from me, nursing his own mug, leaning back in the chair with his arms crossed. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I took a slow sip. I've never felt better. Tires crunched on the gravel outside. Car doors slammed. Footsteps approached the front porch. I heard the familiar jingle of David's keychain. I heard the metal slide into the knob, hit the new cylinder, and fail to turn. The games were officially over. I heard the lock click in vain. Then came the rattling of the doorknob. "What the hell?" David's muffled voice bled through the heavy oak door. "My key isn't working." "Try the deadbolt," Sarah snapped impatiently. More rattling, a frustrated sigh, then a heavy fist pounded on the wood. "Mom, open up." "The lock is jammed." I didn't move. I took another sip of my coffee. Arthur merely raised an eyebrow. The pounding got louder. "Mom, are you in there?" "Open the door." When silence answered them, panic shifted to anger. Sarah's shrill voice cut through the morning air. She changed the locks. "I told you she was losing her mind." "David, break it open. We need to get inside." "Stand back," David growled. That's when the first heavy, furious thud echoed through the house. The floorboards vibrated. He was hitting the door near the handle. I knew exactly what he was using the heavy sledgehammer he kept in the trunk of his car for his weekend landscaping side gigs. Another blow struck, splintering the decorative trim around the doorframe. My heart didn't race. It settled into a cold, hard rhythm. I stood up and smoothed out my sweater. At 6 a.m., my son arrived with his wife and a sledgehammer in their hands. I had changed every lock. Behind me, a calm voice said, "Let them try. I'll handle this." Arthur stood up, his massive frame casting a shadow down the hallway. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man about to swat a very annoying fly. I opened the door, and they both turned pale. I pulled the deadbolt back and yanked the heavy door inward just as David was raising the sledgehammer for a third swing. He froze midair, panting, his face red with rage. Sarah stood behind him, clutching her purse. A smug look of justification wiped clean off her face the second she saw us. David slowly lowered the sledgehammer, his eyes darting from me to Arthur's massive, unmoving presence. "What is going on?" David demanded, trying to sound authoritative, but his voice cracked. "Why did you lock us out? What is Arthur doing here?" I didn't answer his questions. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small silver key attached to a plastic tag along with a folded piece of paper. I held them out. "What is this?" Sarah asked, refusing to step closer. "That is the key to Unit 402 at the Secure It storage facility on Route 9, I stated clearly. The paper is the gate code and the first month's rent receipt. Everything you own is inside it. You no longer live here." David stared at the key like it was a live grenade. You packed our stuff." "Mom, you can't do this. We live here. We have rights. You are guests who overstayed your welcome," I corrected him. "And you lost your privileges the night you sat on my patio and planned to put me in a home so you could steal my house." Sarah gasped, taking a physical step backward. Her face drained of all color. David's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. "You heard that," David whispered. "I heard every word," I replied. "I also took the liberty of removing my credit card from your cell phone family plan this morning, and I canceled the car insurance policy that's in my name. You want to be independent adults who control a household. Start today." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You're crazy. We'll just force our way in." Arthur took one single step forward, his boots heavy on the hardwood. "You're not stepping one foot over this threshold, son. You want to try that hammer again, Dave? Let's see how it works out." David looked at Arthur, then at the hammer, and finally at me. He dropped the tool on the porch. David reached out with a trembling hand and took the storage key and the receipt from my fingers. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't beg. The absolute finality in my eyes, backed by Arthur's silent, towering presence, left no room for negotiation. Sarah spun on her heel, her face flushed with humiliation, and marched back toward the car without a backward glance. David lingered for a fraction of a second, looking like he wanted to find a magical phrase to undo the morning. Finding none, he turned and followed his wife. I watched their car back out of the driveway and speed down the street. Arthur bent down, picked up the sledgehammer, and leaned it against the railing. "I'll get the boys over later to patch up the doorframe." Barely a scratch, really. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, feeling a massive weight lift from my shoulders. "Anytime, Lisa." He tipped his head and walked out to his truck, leaving me alone in the morning air. I closed the front door and threw the new heavy steel deadbolt. The clack of the lock was the most beautiful sound I had heard in months. I walked back into my kitchen. The house was entirely mine again. There were no sticky notes dictating my chores, no missing furniture, and no whispering shadows plotting my downfall. There was only the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the smell of fresh coffee. People think setting boundaries requires dramatic shouting matches, legal threats, or tearful confrontations. It doesn't. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be a victim, pack up the disrespect, and change the locks. I sat down at the kitchen island, picked up my favorite mug, and took a sip. For the first time in a long time, the coffee tasted perfect. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that peace isn't something you just wish for, it's something you have to protect. We spend our whole lives taking care of our children, hoping we raised them well. But sometimes, the most necessary thing you can do for yourself is to draw a hard line. You don't need a screaming match, and you certainly don't have to wait for someone else's permission to be respected. Sometimes, taking back your power is as quiet and simple as changing a lock and refusing to be a guest in your own life. You are never too old to stand your ground. If my story resonated with you, or if you've ever had to make a tough choice to protect your own peace, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about setting boundaries and standing strong. Until next time, take care of yourselves.